Now, you described in the video earlier how you were working. You've got a responsible position in Loughborough University, which raises an important area, which is about getting back to work. And I think you're one of those people that tried to go back as soon as possible, at least initially.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's difficult for a clinician to give prescriptive advice, but from a viewer's point of view, many people do want to go back if at all possible. Of course, sometimes it's not possible. The people that can be too unwell. But assuming that's under consideration, what advice would you give them?
I would say if your employer is flexible enough, and they ought to be under the legislation, but that of course doesn't rule out people being rather awkward at times. If you feel you can go back, you should, but I was happy to go back to work whilst I was having my chemotherapy while I was well for 2 weeks and ill for a week. And I'd had a discussion with my manager about amended duties, which is possible to do. The manager has to agree to let you do less probably than you were doing, and with no reduction in pay, because the financial aspect is a big worry for people. Now, I was in a salaried position, I still am, and I was entitled to 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay. So more fortunate than perhaps few people watching today. I would say don't rush back to work until you have to go, because if you've been off, and I've been off for quite some months, it goes on without you. But that's hard to accept. It was hard for me to accept. And I went back in May because my full pay was finished, and I had a very unhelpful letter from my finance officer that said 2 lines, your pay is up, nothing else. And they didn't send me any help or any advice or anything else. And we talked about it at home, and I'm an academic, so I can be flexible on my hours. So I went in, and it was crippling because we were under management review. My whole world was shifting. We were moving out of a building into another building. We now talked that we can't stay in this building. We have to move out in July. My working world was turned upside down, and that's what affected my psychological improvement. It was detrimental to my mental health going back. Colleagues didn't know what to say to me at times, others did. I would say be measured in your going back to work, and I think you view things differently. I certainly view people differently. Things that seemed important to you 6 months previously or a year previously are not. And they're not life and death. Your illness is life and death. Your self-help is life and death. And getting myself physically okay was challenging enough. I couldn't walk the length of a room without being exhausted. So use everything you can. If you've got to go back because of financial circumstances, go back, but have a discussion about it and ensure that you are having a phased return or amended duties, and don't be frightened to tell people that you are not up to it. One of my worries was that my employers expected me to switch back into full-time mode as if I'm like one of those wound-up battery toys that on and off, and I'm afraid it's a long, hard journey getting back to full strength.
Now, what about for somebody who wasn't really able to go back full-time into the role that they really did like? They wanted to return, but they knew that they could only do their duties in an amended form, i.e. reduced hours or reduced days. Would you still say it's worth trying? Because we often recommend to people, rather than feeling stuck, if they can go back for some time and recoup some of their previous role, it can be valuable.
I'm not so sure.
But your situation may have been different, because I think as you went back, your department was under a lot of pressure.
It was under threat, yes.
It was almost bad timing.
It was awful timing, 20 years timing. I think if the steady state had been there, I think I would have been a lot further down the recovery road. I feel I'm still in recovery. I think sometimes, though, there's a lot of people try to go back, and the effort is too much because it's a big battle. People, if you're looking relatively well, people think you are well. And if you're in the workplace, their expectation is that you can do what you did before. Well, you can't, because sometimes your brain has been fried and you can't think at the same speed. Or sometimes you have physical stuff, physical ailments that prevent you reacting, and your priorities change. So I would say have a go if you feel you can, but it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to admit to people you're not. It was hard for me to face the fact that actually I can't go back to where I was.
And it's almost impossible to explain to other people you're not 100%.
That's right. And I wanted my manager to put an email round to say, I'm back, but on amended duties. It has never happened. He sat in a staff meeting and said, oh, we can see Janet is back fighting fit. I thought, well, I'm not. It's not. So people's expectation, and then you're forever having to remind people that you're not doing this or you're not doing that, and it's an embarrassing conversation to have. And the onus, and it's quite, you have to build yourself up to telling somebody, well, actually, you want me to do this, but I can't.
Yes, there's a lot of it's awkward to discuss reductions in one's capacity or things that you can't do.
And you can't admit it to yourself half the time.
It's not good. It's not really healthy to have lots of those almost negative conversations.
That's so right. And you can't admit it to yourself. You don't want to think. I don't want to think that I'm not as capable as I was previously.
In a way, it's better to accept there's a reduction, but always be aiming for an improvement.
That's yes. To be getting there. I mean, I now say to people when they say, "How are you?" I say, well, "It's been a long road, and I'm in recovery."
Yeah.
And I think that's as much as people want to hear.
Usually,
people don't want to hear your tale of the 10-hour operation and the cannulas and catheters, and they really don't.
No, not unless they've got a special interest for some reason.
Not really, yeah.
Or they're very close friends.
That's right. But you can't, corridor conversation, how are you? Oh, I'm getting there, sort of thing. That's as much as you can do.
There's another side to that return to work, which is what do you do if you're not returning to work? Now, if you are stuck at home, whether you're well or unwell, that can be a difficult situation. It can.
There are one or two friends from the group I go to that have found themselves in this position, and they're having to carve a whole new identity out. I'm carving it out. I think I've changed in some ways. Probably not fundamentally, but I've changed in outlook. And these friends I know are now, because of their cancer, and the drugs they're taking and the operations they're suffering, perhaps their mobility is gone, or their ability to concentrate is gone. So you find that they might do a little more coffee drinking, or they might do a little more sitting about, or a little more I don't know. I just have one friend she's quite a big crafter. She quite likes doing that. I don't know what. I think you have to be very careful. I don't think you need a lot of help. I think you need help to readjust in your expectations, other people's expectations. I mean, your partner, if you've got one, that's hard. If you can't suddenly do things. I do have a friend who phones, actually, a breast buddy who phones me every now and again, and she liked to do a lot of hill walking before her disease was diagnosed, and now she can't do that, but she takes her dog for a walk. So perhaps find something that you used to do and you have to do it less, or an amended version. And I don't know how people, if you've been sporty, I think that's tough for people who find their mobility's gone and their other things have gone. I wouldn't know how to advise on that at all.
One thing we advise occasionally is to try to come up with a role that you have at home.
Right.
A
Okay.
role is more than just an interest or hobby. It's something that is a responsibility and generally leads to something, and where you're being appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.
A classic example would be volunteering. If there's something
Yeah.
along those lines
Yeah.
you can do at home,
Yeah.
that would be great. But
Well-
it's not always possible to find something like that easily.
No, I think I think being in touch virtually, perhaps with some people, befriending people virtually,
Definitely.
or befriending on the phone.
Yes.
The befriending role is a good way to go back, I think.
If you're ready for that.
Yes, and I think my friend, she had cancer 15 years ago, so I think it takes a long time before you can give back.
I think the befriending role, we're going to see a huge development in befriending in
Do you?
cancer services, because it's such an untapped, fantastic resource.
Yeah, yeah,
And I actually think it's very much two-way. The person who's befriending, giving their time, they really actually benefit from it. And the person receiving the time, meeting that person, also benefits from it.
yeah.
So it's like a win-win situation.
I would agree with you, because I think when you said to me, you know, how did you feel, who was helping you? Well, when I felt nobody was helping me, just to have somebody to talk to, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted just somebody to talk to outside of my network, my supporting family or friends. I just needed that one person.
And from the healthcare organisational point of view, it's a free resource.
Sure, and it's a good resource. I mean, so much so that when our big lab died this year, we, you know, husband and son couldn't face having another dog. But then one day this summer I woke up and I thought, I want to get a little dog. I just wanted something to love, to focus on. And I think that's another example. If you've not had a cat, get a cat. Or something dogs are very demanding and they need walking, etc. Cats are free creatures, but the old stroking therapy was lovely. So I would say do that, and so much so that I'm thinking about having Pearl and I training for patting therapy. Dogs that go into hospitals. And I was thinking about this on my last attendance at the Royal Infirmary, and a lady with one of these little dogs came out, and I thought,
It has been used and trialled, particularly in a, let's say, hospice setting. It's
yeah,
been used.
yeah. I think it's
It is
so
effective.
nice.
But if you've got the capacity to look after a dog or a cat, that's even better, because you
Yeah.
have that two-way relationship.
Well, and they're unforgiving, aren't they? They never shout at you, and they never and they never demand. They just all give, aren't they?